Welcome to podcast 3 of the Universe, a love story, evolutionary love podcasts with Marc Gafni, Barbara Marx Hubbard, and I apologize that I'm the only person with only 2 names and not 3. Okay, here we go. So I think what we decided to do for this week is we're in week 3, is just to kind of catch everyone up. We're going to do what they call in music a recapitulation, just to recapitulate. And Barbara, maybe I'll just mention a point in the recapitulation, and then maybe you'll comment on it. We'll talk about it just very briefly, and just in this podcast, it's going to be about 15 minutes. And we're going to try from this week on to keep our podcast to about 15 minutes. We're just going to recapitulate where we are so we really see clearly, and then next week we take off the next step. So 1, we want to evolve the source code we said last week. And by source code, we mean evolving the narrative, evolving the story that we're living in, evolving the framework that we're living in. And what we're saying is, and this is big, is that everyone lives in invisible frameworks. And if you want to start to have power over your life, don't just do a particular methodology or a particular practice. To really get power, to really change your game, is to actually relocate yourself in a bigger narrative and a better narrative with better information. You've got to change your map, right? If you've got an outdated map, you're never going to find your way. So what we have to do is we have to actually redraw the map of reality based on the best spiritual, scientific, psychological, anthropological, right? The best information available today from all places. That's what we're doing.
And the important thing there is, according to the source code, you behave, you act, and your life is directed. And most of us don't know we have a source code.
Right.
It's invisible. It's like a fish swimming in water.
Right.
So by noticing your source code, like if you think you're out of control and the world's coming to an end,
right,
you're going to behave differently than if you think you're evolving into a world that has infinite possibilities.
Right.
It's hugely different what source code. So I think what we're doing here is making us aware of the source code that we may have and what's the best possible source code that gives us the most accurate, loving, truthful story to empower all of us.
Right, right. It's like what we're doing is, we're laying down, we're articulating the texts of the evolutionary Bible, or if you want to use a more Eastern term, right, the evolutionary sutras. Sutra is like a verse, right? It's the great evolutionary Ramayana, right? Ramayana. Sorry with the M there. The great evolutionary Ramayana, right? It's the great evolutionary Mahamudra, right? So I'm borrowing terms from the East, right? It's the evolutionary, Aboriginal story. The point is, we're re-narrating the sacred text which talks about the origin of reality, its purpose, its direction. Because remember that the sacred texts that we have available to us today were written by people who, on the one hand, were wildly open and awake and had deep, direct connections to spirit. On the other hand, they didn't know, none of them, some of the basic truths about reality, not only scientific but moral, that we know today, right? The basic idea that a woman is fully equal to a man, the idea of democracy, right? The idea that no one's expendable, right? All of these ideas were fundamentally unavailable. The idea of universal human rights, none of these ideas existed to the people who created the great traditions. So they had deep knowledge of certain key dimensions of spirit, which were critical and beautiful and told us enormous amount about the good, the true, and the beautiful. And there are other ways where it was actually the bad and the ugly, right? And the barbaric. And so we need to re-narrate a new sacred text.
Well, I remember the story I was told when I graduated from college in 1951, from Bryn Mawr College, was this: get married, have as many babies as possible, take care of your husband, take care of your house, and the men are to go out and win wars, you make money. The entire materialistic culture was what I was given as the best that could be. And one professor said, you know what, I think most of our problems have been solved. Now, this is 1951.
Right.
So we didn't have a clue what was coming. And I do want to say one thing not to judge the human race too harshly, because sometimes I think what it was like 50,000 years ago when we just got self-reflective consciousness and we had no teeth, no fangs, no fur, no clothes, and we made it through up to the point of the power of destroying the world or evolving the world by the source code that we have. So I just want to say the enormous importance of shifting the source code when we have the power to destroy or create at this scale.
Yeah, absolutely. So you get what we mean by source code. Source code means the invisible framework in which we live, and we're going to now evolve that source code based on all the information we have. When I say all the information, I want to be really clear. Scientific information, psychological information, but also interior information, right? The voices of essence speaking to us and through us, right? The voices of interiors, the voices of love, the voices of values, the voices of meaning, right? Those are called interiors. So we're going to take the best we have in interiors and the best we have in exteriors, scientific, objective information, and weave together a new narrative. Now, Barbara, you just said so importantly that in 1951, right, there was just this another moment where, on the one hand, there were people saying it was meaninglessness, like we talked about and you talked about in the last podcast. And then there was this other part of the world which said, we're progressing, it's all good, it's all fantastic.
Do more of it.
And do more of it. So you had kind of the large mainstream culture was success, move forward, the war is over, let's forget about it. But then there were people
we
won. And we won. And there were people like you and your husband who actually were the existentialists, meaning, well, actually this is empty, right? And how do we actually construct meaning? And how do we actually reweave the source code? And so what the existentialist said was, there is no source code. There is no meaning. We're just making it up. What we're now realizing in 2015, based on an enormous amount of depth and study and maturation and transformation and growth, is that actually there is deep meaning available. That actually you can disclose meaning. And it's a new realization. There's a post-dogmatic, it's not the old dogma, but there's a post-dogmatic knowing of the patterns that connect, right? Of the new story, right? For the first time, we're able to see the narrative. We can see where we're going, and we can gather the best information.
Well, we talked about cosmogenesis
right, we did.
earlier. That was only the 1960s. And I want to just make a point on the newness of this perspective.
Please.
Because it wasn't until they actually realized that the universe is not eternal or static, that it's evolving and we are evolving. That was only the 1960s. So when I graduated from college in 1951, they didn't know.
Right.
They did not know. Nobody knew. And then
that the universe itself was evolving.
They did not know, much less that we were evolving.
Right.
And so the other thing that we didn't know, therefore, what was our meaning? Where should we go with all this power? What should we be doing this? When I went to Bryn Mawr College, I remember they said, what course do you want to major in? Well, I had to know what direction the universe was going in before I knew what I wanted to major in. And I just want to make the point as how hard it was to give meaning to your life.
Right.
If you didn't know the direction of the larger process that you were part of. And the crises are also new. We really didn't know we had an environmental crisis. We
barely knew we had an environment.
We didn't know we had an environment. We didn't know we had a population problem. If we want more doubling of the population, we could destroy life. We didn't know we had the powers of gods to destroy. So I would like to just say, for the human species, the newness of this gives me a sense of great empathy for us.
Totally.
We didn't have any professors who were on the other side of this to say, here's the way we're going.
Right.
So the ones of us who were searching for it were really searching into an open space.
Right. And out of searching into that open space, we've gathered together, really for the first time in history, and integrated all of the great wisdom traditions from the traditional period, before the Renaissance, from the great spiritual religious traditions, from the Renaissance and on, which we might call the scientific period or the modern period, and then the postmodern period. After modernity failed in so many ways, the two great bombs dropped in World War II, which symbolized the failure of modernity's power. Right? So we're going to draw wisdom from all three of those great traditions and weave them together. And as we've said every week so far, the result is a new story. The result is the realization that the universe is a story, that it's heading in a particular direction, and that its major plot line is love. And here's a big sentence, and that we are personally implicated in evolution.
So I want to say why the universe is heading for love.
Please.
Given the fact that we could destroy the world with the powers that we have inherited from the genius of humanity.
Right.
If we do not learn how to love one another, as all the great traditions have said fundamentally is true, but if we don't learn it now, we'll self-destruct. So it looks like love has come up on the agenda as never before because of the power to destroy and the power to co-create. So I'd like to put the need to love at the center of the story. And when we say it's been a love story towards ever greater allurement of particles joining with particles to greater...
Which we haven't talked about, which we're going to talk about next week very clearly, that allurement of particles. And we're going to be just transparent here for a second. We haven't talked about that yet. That's next week. So we're going to get to that next week. So if you didn't get that, just bracket it. Keep going.
Okay, so I just wanted to say that what we're saying now about the need for the new source code of love as the direction of evolution is vital for survival. It's not just nice.
Right. That's the key, right? And it's vital for the survival, not just of the individual, but all of a sudden we're facing a level of crisis where our issues are not local, they're global, and we can we're before a tale of two futures. Right? The future can be filled with innovation, creativity, right? Human dignity of an unimaginable proportion, or we can actually implode and self-destruct. The difference will be, will we actually evolve our consciousness? Will we evolve love? Will we actually begin to realize that the universe is a love story, that we're personally implicated in this love story, in this evolutionary love story? And that when we wake up as conscious agents of that evolution and begin to come together, we can actually transform the whole story, but we're ahead of ourselves. So we're already kind of reaching towards next week. Before we finish, Barbara, let's just, kind of summarize what are the four basic things we've said. We've said the evolution is not a fact. The world, let's get this straight. The world, the universe is not a fact, but a story. And it's a love story. It's moving towards greater love. We've said that that's an urgent necessity to realize that. Without that realization, which will shift our consciousness and therefore transform our action, we actually can self-destruct. We've pointed out that there were three big bangs: cosmological evolution, planets and stars; biological evolution, life; and cultural evolution, the evolution of deeper ways of living, ideas, consciousness, where we go from kind of caveman to the most advanced human beings. Those are the three big bangs. And the trajectory of evolution from cosmological to biological to cultural evolution, three big bangs, is towards greater and greater love, more and more caring. Barbara, you pointed out greater interconnectivity. A dog has more interconnectivity, more love happening inside, right, than an amoeba. A human being has 50 trillion cells, more interconnectivity and love than an amoeba. And that we're all unique expressions of that love, which we're not going to talk about yet. We're all unique expressions of that love intelligence. That's going to be really important to understand our place in the love story. But that, we're ahead of ourselves. So that's what we know. We're personally implicated in this story. This story needs us. To know what role we play in the story, we need to understand the story. That's where we're going next week. Good?
Good.
Rock on. Awesome. Next week it is.